What's going on, guys? So we are back for more Eddie Brock Carnage with issue 5, where this time the conflict between Eddie and Carnage, it's starting to ruffle some feathers, and that's only going to lead to more trouble coming their way. So with that said, if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so this picks up from where we left off in issue 4, where Eddie locked himself and Carnage inside of Muse's hideout as a way to force Carnage into telling him where Carnage hid the missing passengers from issue 1, which at the time we saw was effective enough for Eddie to get the answers and pass them on to Bailey. But after nearly being burnt alive, this left Eddie in pretty bad shape, and to Eddie's surprise, he's not healing. And when he thinks to himself, like, why am I not healing? Carnage doesn't waste any time giving him the answer. And he says here, because Eddie, you were a bad boy. To put it another way, I don't feel like it. And Carnage goes on to say here, you may control our powers, Eddie, but healing, that's not about using the symbiote abilities. It's about understanding human physiology on a cellular level. I do it naturally. I'm inside every part of you, but you're ignorant. You could heal yourself if you understood your own body, but you don't. You just let Venom take care of you. Didn't ask any questions. Well, I'm not Venom. I'm Carnage. You crossed me, Eddie. So now you need to learn a lesson. A lesson called suffering. And you know, it's like with Carnage saying this, we've seen a lot of examples, a whole lot recently, where there were instances of Venom saving Eddie and pulling his body back together, and the same for Dylan, which for the Venom symbiote in either instance, there's no questions asked, because Venom would just do it. But now that Carnage brings this up, it kind of makes you think like, yeah, there should have probably been a moment where Venom taught Eddie a thing or two about self-healing, though at the same time, you might think that Eddie would have learned some of this himself during his time as a human symbiote, but apparently not. So now this just leaves all the power in Carnage's hands, to the point where Carnage could just give Eddie enough to survive for as long as Carnage will allow it. But just moments later when the police show up, Eddie sees them and he's like, okay, good. The FBI must have told you guys where I was. Surely you're here to come pick me up, so let's hurry because the passengers don't have much time. But one of these cops tells Eddie, no, we've been instructed to restrain you. And he starts telling Eddie his rights. So right there, Eddie's like, wait, you guys are arresting me? So he gets up and he tries to approach the officers, but these officers aren't taking any chances, so they just tase him right away. And this just has Carnage like, oh Eddie, you still think people will let you be a hero? Shocking. And that pun was very much intended. And now that Eddie's out cold, Carnage sees this as yet another opportunity to try and break into that part of Eddie's mind that he's been keeping away from Carnage. And now while this is going on, we jump forward to Colorado, to what is basically the general area along the flight path of Oceanic 814, where Eddie is painfully awakened by Misty Knight, who intentionally kept Eddie sedated and handcuffed until they made their way out here. Because when Carnage told Eddie where he was keeping the passengers, he didn't give Eddie a specific location, just the general area. So all they really know is that the survivors are in one of these caves out here, which is what Eddie told Bailey and she passed on to Misty. And that's why Misty brought Eddie here. But even still, she doesn't know what exactly is going on with Eddie. She just knows that she needs his help to find the survivors, among whom one of them is her cousin, who was the air marshal on that flight. But while she's explaining a lot of this to Eddie, they also have another problem on their hands. Because after she tells him here that they're in the Colorado Rockies, moving along the flight path of Oceanic 814, she also tells him a storm is coming in, a big one. Even if those people aren't out in the weather, the temperature's going to drop. They won't survive. We need to find them now. So that's where Eddie tells her, if we get close enough, I'll be able to zero in on the exact location. And this is where Misty asks, how exactly is Eddie going to be able to do that? And she even asks him, did you kidnap the passengers? Or maybe it was your friend. And right there, Eddie's like, Venom? No, it wasn't Venom. And that's where Carnage tells Eddie, of course not. Venom would never do something this interesting. But again, this just goes back to what I mean about Misty not being aware of what's going on with Eddie. But this moment leads to an internal conversation between Carnage and Eddie, where Eddie asks, it's because I gave up control, isn't it? You took over when I was weak, confused, didn't know what was happening. I invited you in, and for a little while you were steering the ship. You put the passengers into suspension, stole their minds, and then you hid them away. And this is where Carnage is just like, I didn't do anything you didn't let me do, Eddie. Like you said, you invited me in. And that's where Eddie says, I didn't realize it was possible. I won't let it happen again. Not ever. Carnage, do you hear me? And right when Eddie gets ready to say never again, they hit some crazy turbulence, which now has Agent Winter's like, nah, we turning this thing around. But of course, Misty's not having that. because if they don't find the passengers soon, they're gonna freeze to death. And again, her cousin is out there with them. And Agent Winters is basically like, I hear what you're saying, but the pilot said, we can't stay up in this weather, and if we don't turn back, we'll die. So right there, Misty's like, okay, give me 1 minute, give me 60 seconds, just before she turns to Eddie and she's like, whatever you're gonna do, you need to do it. Tell me you feel something, tell me we're close. And Eddie just tells her, I'll try. So right here, Eddie tries to use the Carnage symbiote to fill out the location of where the passengers are. Because like we saw before a number of times, the passengers are being held in suspension with Carnage's symbiote matter. And that's why Eddie's intention is just to feel through Carnage and find out where exactly they are. But Carnage just says here, what are you doing, Eddie? Using your spidey sense? I think you got me confused with someone else. This'll never work. You're in so much pain. You can barely think. If you'd like, I can wake up the passengers. I'd be happy to. That way, they'll know what's happening when they freeze to death. And that right there just breaks Eddie's concentration completely. So Eddie tells Misty that he can't feel anything. And after Agent Winters hears that, he's just like, don't even worry about it. We finna bust a Yui. We getting out of here. But at this point for Eddie, he understands that if he's gonna find these passengers, he needs to do it himself. So right here, he just stands up and breaks his handcuffs like it's nothing. He kicks the door off the helicopter and he leaps out. Only to soon after have Misty follow behind him and land right on his back. Cause right here, Misty's like, you aren't getting away that easy, Brock. And she's like, now show me where they are or I'll blast your damn symbiote head off. Only for Carnage to pop up and be like, that's not a very nice thing to say. And this is how Misty finds out that Eddie's bonded to Carnage and not Venom. And it's a crazy time and place to find this out. Cause now Carnage is like, yes, we are Carnage. Perhaps you should have looked before you leaped, Agent Knight. Which is hilarious, but Carnage doesn't do anything here. And he can't really, with Eddie having more of the physical control. But instead he just tells Eddie that she'll likely freeze to death in seconds. And if not, they can just cut her open later. So right here, Eddie just uses Carnage to cover Misty to keep her warm, which freaks her out for a moment because she's not sure what's happening. But right here, Carnage just tells Eddie that he's likely gonna regret keeping Misty alive. And he even tries to make a deal with Eddie like, hey, if you kill her, I'll heal you. And of course, Eddie doesn't fall for it. But on their way down, Eddie starts to figure out a few things. And it's like in his mind, he's asking Carnage, but Carnage isn't trying to help. But Eddie just figures here, during the time where Carnage took over his body, it's not likely that Carnage took the passengers far, since Carnage didn't know how long he was going to have control. So the cave has to be very close along its flight path. And then Eddie asks Carnage, why aren't you threatening to kill the passengers before I find them? This isn't like you. And right there, Carnage is just like, this game's been fun, but I'm over it. Or maybe they're already dead. Which again is Carnage messing with Eddie, even after Carnage was like, I'm over it. So clearly he's not. But now that they're on the ground, Eddie's able to sense the passengers nearby, because again, Carnage has been holding them in suspension with his own symbiote matter. And now that they're much closer, Eddie's able to sense them. And when he tells Misty that they found the cave, she's like, oh, so you did do this. And he just tells her, not in the way you're thinking. I could never. And as they approach the cave, Misty lights the way, and lo and behold, they find the passengers. So Eddie lets Misty know they're still alive. And since he still has partial control of Carnage, he uses that to let the passengers down and wake them up. But at this point, Carnage tells Eddie like, hey, you know she's not gonna let you get away with this. And because of that, we're gonna have to kill her. Which is what Carnage wants, in case that wasn't obvious. But once the passengers are safely brought down and woken up, she calls for backup and a ton of medical units to get these people treated and get them out of here. And it's around this time when she finds her cousin Etta as well. And all of this has Misty caught up for a moment. And to the point where by the time she turns around to look over to Eddie, he's gone. And at this point, when we go back to Eddie and Carnage, the sedatives that Misty gave him earlier have worn off, and much of the pain from earlier is coming back. So Carnage just picks right up where he left off with the whole that's what you get type of speech. And he tells Eddie even if he gets away, he's gonna die out here. And when that happens, Carnage is just like, he'll find somebody else. And he tells Eddie even if he doesn't, it will have been worth it. But at this point, since Eddie hasn't gotten too far, since he wasn't moving too fast, Misty Knight catches up with them. And right away, Carnage is just like, see, I told you regret letting her live. Cause of course, Misty still wants to bring Eddie in. But now Carnage is like, okay, Eddie, you've suffered enough. And Carnage is like, I suppose you've learned your lesson. And he finally heals Eddie. So again, with Eddie having the physical control, he stops Misty, only to have Carnage in his ear the whole time talking about, kill her, Eddie, kill her now. So Eddie uses Carnage to draw out one of those symbiote scythes just before he chops off her bionic arm, only to then pull her in close and say, don't come looking. And Eddie just leaves her out here like that, which isn't as bad as it looks, I guess, cause help is on the way. But now this creates a scenario where we'll have to wait and see if this is something that Misty's just gonna let go of or not. And following this, the next thing we get is an epilogue that takes us back to Chicago, because aside from Misty and her cousin Etta, as well as many others, there's still one other person who's found themselves caught up in this conflict between Carnage and Eddie. And it's a person who's recently had much of their hard work burned to the ground, with his whole studio basically becoming collateral damage because Carnage and Eddie just can't get along. And now this person, they haven't the slightest clue who did this. And I mean, at this point, I don't even know why I'm trying to make it sound mysterious anymore, because this person is definitely Muse, and not only is he not dead, but now he wants to find out who burnt down his warehouse, because the person responsible is now his new obsession. So yeah, now after Eddie pretended to look for Muse, Muse is now coming after him, for real. And now don't forget, Carnage is still considering Muse to be its next host. With Carnage being a huge fan of Muse's work, this could turn into something very interesting, because for Carnage, meeting Muse would be like a wish come true. So with that said, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like, cliffhanger, and let me know not only if you think Carnage will leave Eddie for Muse, but let me know in the comments whether or not you would want Carnage to stay with Eddie, or if you want him to go to Muse, or one of the other potential targets that Carnage has mentioned throughout this series. Let me know which one of the potential hosts you guys are rooting for. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.